Jan Pascale, set decorator for Mank. This is your first film with David Fincher. What was it like joining the Fincher repertoire?
Oh, it was very exciting. It was a quite a challenge, but I was delighted with the outcome of the film. All the way along, we knew it was something a little bit special. I love doing period films, and I love Fincher's attention to detail. And I had always wanted to work with Don Burt, who is an amazing designer. So it was sort of a wonderful opportunity.
Mhm. Well, the film is quite an undertaking. It's black and white, and you're recreating old Hollywood. And I imagine attention to detail is important to David. So, what kind of directives did he give you?
Well, we wanted to be as true to historical fact as we could be. Recreating San Simeon was as you can imagine, quite a challenge. So Don, we had a great researcher, and he provided tons of information for us. So we sort of take it all in and then distill it so that it works for what David's trying to achieve. So what Don did with the San Simeon, the Grand Salon, was, because of course everyone's on a limited budget, right, as we were, he figured out a way to do the Grand Salon and then turn that into the dining room by adding woodworking to the walls, moving the fireplace, adding the elaborate molding that you see in San Simeon. And then
Wow.
we did our best to recreate the tables and chairs and the tapestries and all the other details. So it was really it's sort of daunting at first, but taking in the research and reviewing it with David and seeing where we could take liberties was really enlightening. David is almost encyclopedic in his knowledge of cameras and equipment of the period, which can put a chill into anyone trying to present something to him. But he was quite cooperative and really great, and taught us a lot about which way to go and what was acceptable at the time. So that was another challenge, and also, when you're doing a period film and everything is 100 years old, you're trying to make it look not 100 years old is a challenge in itself.
Mm-hmm. So, did you just start with research? Did you watch any old Hollywood films from that era? I guess, did you watch Citizen Kane?
Well, I'm a big fan of Citizen Kane, but I didn't actually watch it until we were partway through. I didn't watch it again, I should say, until we were partway through. But I'm a big black and white movie fan anyway, so I'm a Turner Classic junkie, so I watch black and white films all the time. I love what David did at the end with, sort of incorporating some of the older techniques into the film to make it look. I had a friend of mine, a production designer friend, called me first to say, "I can't believe you got to shoot in San Simeon," which was the biggest compliment we could get, right? And then to say, the sound was really funny. And I had to explain that was intentional, that David really meant it to be that way.
Well, you've worked on black and white film before. You did Good Night and Good Luck. So how did this experience compare to that one?
Well, when I first met with Don about it, I said, "Oh, I've done black and white. I can do this." And Don said, "No, this is very different. The way the images were captured was quite different, because on Good Night and Good Luck we shot on film, and we talked to George Clooney and said, that was a really limited budget. We had $7 million for that one, but all in the whole movie. So we couldn't paint anything, and I couldn't really build anything. So everything was shot as is, but it sort of worked. This one was a little bit different because the digital imagery is captured, and it really captures every detail. So David and Dawn had done some testing and with the camera that we were going to be using. And they discovered that if we used our iPhones with the noir filter and photographed everything, that is how it would appear in our movie. So we would shoot everything because we wanted it to be pleasing to the eye as the actors and everybody came onto the set. But we also wanted to make sure that it worked in our black and white. So we shot everything with our noir filter, printed everything in black and white, printed everything in color to make sure that it worked. But it was really interesting because the whites were completely different. Normally on any film, white is almost forbidden to use. But we were concerned because Gary spends half the movie in bed, right? So the sheets are a big concern, right? So I ended up, for a camera test, I got about 20 different colors of pillowcases and we labeled them and we did a test. And oddly enough, white was what worked best.
Wow.
And that's almost never the case. Usually we end up finding the right gray or the right off-white. But it was really an education of how things were captured by the digital imagery.
That's such a modern solution with your iPhone filter.
I know, right?
Like you couldn't do this 20 years ago if this were made 20 years ago. So what was the process with the color testing? How long did that take? And what, besides the white, like what color schemes did you realize worked best in achieving the right tones for black and white on screen?
Well, for Selznick's office, we wanted to have a really comfortable setting. So there were 2 sofas and we photographed tons of different fabrics and nothing really worked quite right. We wanted leather. We wanted it to, be like a man's study almost. They come in, they get their cigars and they lounge on the chairs, on the sofas. And those sofas ended up being a very odd shade of green. They were somewhere between olive and lime. It was just really odd. And luckily, one of our prop houses offered to make the sofas for me and rent them to me. So they helped us budgetarily. And they did a beautiful job because we couldn't find exactly the right size sofas to fit all the guys on the sofa. It's always about the sofa. But yeah, there were some really odd colors that really turned out really well in the film. And the more we tried to go with the traditional, brown leather and that sort of thing, it just looked so dead through our noir filter. Now that we knew we had to use that, but it was quite interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, lighting is also such an important part of the film because it's in black and white. So how closely did you collaborate with the DP and also like the costume designers, their clothes too? Just talk about the lights.
Yeah, Trisha's costumes are amazing. We talked with her. It somehow worked out so well. She and Don were in constant contact about colors, and he would communicate that with me. But the lighting was a challenge because we wanted to get the period lighting, but we had to have it exposed enough so that it could be captured digitally. So every fixture was changed into LED, dimmable LED by our fixture department, which is something that, it's now the new normal, but it's people are slow to catch on that every fixture, when you're capturing the images digitally, really has to be altered in some way. So it was quite a process. We would find a fixture that worked and then have to turn it over to our lighting fixture department, and then they would modify it. And then if it was rented, we'd change it back. But it was a challenge, but often our lighting was what lit the sets. So Eric Messerschmidt did an amazing job working with what we gave him to get the moody look that he achieved.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned the couches before and like the vintage camera equipment. So what was the hardest vintage prop to find?
Oh, David really wanted arc lights, and they don't exist anymore. And they were originally literally a chemical reaction, and they had wicks that had to be trimmed, and they were outlawed years ago. I mean, I remember when I first started out seeing a real arc light in practice, and it had to have an attendant and trimming, and it was a fire hazard basically. So they were definitely outlawed. But we searched and searched and searched. Most of our camera equipment and lighting equipment came from a prop house, which is amazing, called History for Hire. And they actually supplied me on Good Night and Good Luck as well. But they had no arc lights, and not even the shell of them. So we dug and dug and dug, and finally at Warner Brothers lighting department, they had pieces of arc lights, the shell and the lens. And we kind of used very strong persuasion, shall I say, to get them to, rebuild them for us. So they actually rebuilt 3 of them that we could use for the scene with Marion burning at the stake.
Wow.
So it was insane. But then we had to get them, I mean, they weighed a ton too. We had to get them up on top of the towers, the lighting towers that we had built. Mm-hmm. So it was
them together, and then they took them apart, and now it's back at the WB.
Well, that's what happened. They took them apart. We returned them at the end of the show, and then we needed them again. We had to do another little bit of additional photography while we were still shooting, but they had already disassembled them. So then trying to talk that guy into rebuilding them the second time was quite an interesting conversation.
You did it.
He did it. He did it. It was great.
Well, Jan, it was great speaking with you. Thank you so much.